Welcome back to the second hour of Altered Egos. My name is Bob Hansen, and I have on the line with me Nicole Lebrasseur. Good morning.
Hey, well, good afternoon.
Oh, there you go.
But good morning to you, too.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I forget that we're in a big territory, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's mind-boggling when you consider it. We're the largest surface area of a country on Earth.
Yeah, and one of the most wealthy next to Africa. And this is why they've been trying to keep this territory to a minimum of citizens.
Absolutely. And always fluffing it up with sycophants for the royal family and the suzerain, who control pretty much everything in these territories. I call her now the genocidal suzerain, Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of England, her heirs and successors, to whom all our MPs and police and military, our Prime Minister, swear allegiance, not to our Constitution, not to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So the authority structure in Canada is the Constitution with the Charter attached at the top, and then the Queen of England, the suzerain of Canada, and below her, Parliament. And she exercises her will through the Queen's Privy Council. It's my understanding, Nicole, you and your co-workers are not that happy with that situation.
No, we're not. And it's not just, everybody likes to point the finger at the Queen, but if you look at her actual title and you go through the documents from the United Nations, the 1961 Vienna Convention, you will, and then even throughout history, like we've uncovered documents from 1565 for Australia and other places. And actually, I was listening to that video that you played just earlier, and I would be able to debunk that video simply because the biggest landowners actually is the Vatican through the Doctrine of Discovery.
Okay, this is huge, this part. This part's always been a little bit murky for me. And before we go there, though, I just want to, to hang this on to what I said earlier, not to, be in great debate, because I know it's a lot of people question the authority of the Queen in this country, whether it's actually real or not. But when you say, well, take her name off all the documents, well, everybody throws the anchor out and can't do that. Don't have to do that. They say, well, why is
but they do, because her real title under the Vatican is the Princess Elector, and she's the head of collections for taxation in the world.
So she's the enforcer, kind of, isn't she?
Yeah, she's the military presence, and that's why the Governor General represents her.
Okay, so let's go back to day one. Doctrine of Discovery. This arrogant document from the Catholic Church around 1593 or 1493. So tell us how that got started. What was the incentive for it? Well, if you think about it, it was all the discovery that was going on. But tell us how it got started. Who were the people in the church? And then how it evolved to where we are now.
Well, actually, it involves so much. I mean, we'd have to do about 100 shows.
Okay, this would be number one. This is number one.
This is number one.
And it's an overview.
Well, yeah, so the Doctrine of Discovery actually came from Pope Alexander. And if you look at all the cardinals that were with him at that time, or even prior to that, actually Alexander was a Jewish Spaniard. And in Rome, this is why, again, the Jews were pretty much in Rome with, around the Vatican, and why they were so nice to them. And then eventually the Catholics, got fed up. And then this is when the Inquisition and everything happened, at different times throughout history. And what they did was, they wanted to change the Jewish people there and make them Catholics, which was, again, just an illusion. We've been living illusions throughout almost the entire existence of this world. Because if you look at who the cardinals were at the time, the cardinals were the sons, the heirs of the wealthy families, which were the scions. So we're not dealing, like when people are talking about Zionism and the Zionists, it's not the Zionists. They're mistaken, and that was done on purpose. so that they would not see that it was actually the sons of Sion, Sion.
Okay, this is important.
Yeah, and all of these cardinals were made the heads of each country, basically under the crowns, but they were the final decision makers because they've always been able to maintain that the physical body dies, but your soul lives on. So the spiritual lords, this is when they created the spiritual lords and the temporal lords to run parliaments. So in actuality, it's the spiritual lords that had the final say, even over the kings.
All right. So what about...
Yeah, so it was always to protect them. Everything was always done to protect them. And that's why when I hear videos like the one you just played, I have to wonder if the gentleman's a Catholic, you know, and because a lot of people don't like to talk about that, and they'd like to bury their heads in the sands because they want to keep believing.
Okay. So they make this decree, pardon me, right at the age of the discovery of the New World.
Right.
And it was actually just after the discovery in the Caribbean. Is that correct? Like it was 1493.
Yeah, yeah, it's because they were discovering Africa, and then they had discovered North America, and they want to make sure. And this is why Spain got one of the biggest pieces, and then the UK got a piece, and then France got another piece. And when you're looking at that, it's the Pope that split the continent in three parts, so that everybody, the countries, wouldn't fight over it. And he said, okay, well, now you can rule there, but it's still ruling under me.
Gotcha. So it was still Catholic authority. When you say the continent, you're talking North America? I mean, the Americas.
North America.
All the Americas. Yes.
All of the Americas and the islands. So when you're looking at that, this is where, because of the structure of the Vatican, and the Vatican was the only one who could elect a king or queen.
Well,
so if you didn't get the blessing of the Vatican, you know, a lot of kings and queens came up throughout history and tried to fight this, but in the end, they always lost.
Okay, well, look at...
The Vatican was always able to come back and take over.
Elizabeth I in the 1500s. Her father was Henry VIII, who broke away from the Catholics. So I guess she wasn't really appointed by the Vatican, right?
No, and the Catholics, we took over the UK in 1825 and then finalized it by 1850.
Well, was that 1825? Okay, gotcha. I didn't realize.
And basically took over the Anglican Church.
Okay. So is the Queen of England still head of the Church of England?
She's the head in name only for tax collection.
Okay, let's go back then to the colonists era. It's all about money, really, when you get down to it.
It is all about money. And the saddest part is that when you look at their wealth, we are the ones, okay, the citizens worldwide own nothing except the benefit of making them wealthy and paying for it.
That's a benefit?
According to them.
Of course. Okay, it's their benefit.
Yeah, it's their benefit, but all we get to do is support their wealth and their dictatorship agendas.
All right. So we run as a colony up until 1931 in these territories called Canada, right? Mm-hmm. And that was the first time there was a shakedown in that political structure and authority. Is that correct? In Canada?
Yeah, well, actually in Canada, we were liberated before 1867. When they created the British North American Act and constituted Canada, we were actually, because there was over 4 million people across Canada, they said that we were too big and that they needed somebody here on the ground to run it. However, they would still be negotiating at the federal level for us, not the federal level, but at the international level. So what they did is they wanted, the provinces to have prime ministers and whatnot. So what they did is they sent the British North American Act as a sample or an example of what our prime minister can do. And because they didn't know how to establish it, they just kept the BNA Act, which is not a constitution, to serve as our constitution.
Okay, so before the BNA Act, we were a colony straight up. Is that correct?
Straight up colonies, yeah.
Okay, so after the BNA Act, we became a suzerainty?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was a pivotal point I had to hook in time so I can kind of reframe my thinking on Canada. So we have the 1931, we have the BNA Act, as you say, and it's running along. It's a fairly primitive country. First World War takes place, and we won't get into some of those details and the involvement of the British and the Americans, etc. We'll go through to 1931. So the something with Westminster. Statute of
that's a statute of Westminster. And if you remember the Balfour Report, okay, these all started in 1919 when there was an actual coup d'etat by all of the prime ministers across the world, within the imperial crown.
Okay.
Yeah, all of the colonies worldwide under the British crown. So what they did is it took years. But by 1925, or 1926, I should say, when they all attended the imperial convention, this is when they initiated the Statute of Westminster. And it didn't come out till actually 1931. But this is where they said, okay, well, now the prime ministers from each country, presidents will run their countries and will no longer have to be tied to the United Kingdom. And first of all, the Queen was never the head of the United Kingdom Parliament. They stopped doing that in 1565. But they always made it look like they were the sovereigns as the tax collectors.
So let's just stop for a brief moment there. So the Queen in the 1500s, or the monarchs in the 1500s, are allegedly inferior to the Parliament, and yet even to this day, the Parliament of England is not allowed to talk about the wealth of the monarch or the business of the monarch in Parliament.
Yeah, but that again is illusion. They need somebody to be pointed the finger at. So you always point to the tax collector. You don't point the finger at the tax receiver.
Okay.
Okay. So if you look at the Vatican is the receiver, and what happened in all of the parliaments, it was the temporal lords and the spiritual lords who looked after everything.
Okay. So when after 1931. Where did our tax money go? Like, are we still being taxed and the money withdrawn to either the Bank of England or the Vatican?
Actually, yeah. I mean, everything you look at as far as land ownership goes, everything is done in fee simple in Canada. Even the government of Canada does not own the lands.
This is crazy.
So, yeah, it's crazy. But again, because of the doctrine of discovery, even when you look back at the court case from the Supreme Court case, when they are saying that the First Nations still need to prove that they've been on that territory, they are still using the doctrine of discovery, whether they admit it or not.
So we had this June decision in 2010 from the Supreme Court of Canada. Supreme Court of Canada gave the CHLY Nation in the interior of BC ownership of their lands, title to their lands. Most of them.
Right, but they did that in 2014, and the nations won their appeal, but the thing is they still have to prove that they've been there forever.
Each nation, one by one.
Exactly. So what does that tell you? They shouldn't have to prove that they've been anywhere.
True that.
For long periods of time, anywhere in North America.
Yeah. I
mean, it's totally ridiculous for them to say, okay, well, now prove that you were on this territory. Because that comes back to terra nullius.
Terra nullius? What's that?
Terra nullius is used in the doctrine of discovery, meaning that there was nobody on that land, and they have the right to take it.
Nobody that was Catholic.
Yeah.
Just want to make that fine point.
Nobody that was Catholic.
Okay.
So this is what they were doing. And at the time, if you look, we used to have the League of Nations. And in the League of Nations, they had to create, when they went to war, there were certain rules and regulations. They were not supposed to go around cities or towns, or, they had to fight in fields. And, but then when you look at the decolonization of all the countries, as everything kind of came out through history, like 80 countries decolonized after World War II. Well, when you're looking at everything, when they looked at Canada and the United States and said, well, we need to be decolonized. Well, they'll say, well, you were in 1931. But the thing is they still have that queen. And they're saying that we chose that queen, but it was never us. It was always the prime ministers and the governor generals.
Who are in conflict.
That made the decisions. Yeah, so we were never formally decolonized as colonies.
Well, that's heartening news.
Well, it's time to do it, don't you think?
Oh.
So what I did is, I know that you read the document that I wrote the other day.
This is the Whiskey Tango Foxtrot? The WTF document?
Yeah.
The Governor General.
WTF.
Okay, this is the one to the Governor General, right?
Well, not quite. I didn't post that on that page, but if you want, I can read you the letter that I wrote to the Governor General. Because, in fact, the Governor General, Canada is in a third-party management, has been since 1931. And because we have not drafted our own personal constitution as a people across Canada, we were put in third-party management. If you look at countries who get taken over or whatever, or there's a problem between the presidents and the people and there's an uprising, then the military is allowed to come in and step in to make sure that everything stays cool. Now, this is what they did to us in 1931. In 1947, finally, the Governor General was in charge of lands to protect the lands legally. So, and again, this is all covered within the doctrine because of the doctrine of discovery. So it's not the Queen. She is the suzerain, but she is not the personal owner of everything in Canada. It is the Vatican.
Yikes. That's even stinkier than what I was thinking about the suzerain. Well,
and in our videos, we explain it all. And this is why if you look at, we can get rid of the Queen all we want, but who is the one behind the Supreme Court of Canada, the Supreme Courts of the United States, and the UK Supreme Courts? Who brought the Supreme Courts in? Those were the spiritual lords, who were actually the cardinals at the Vatican.
Okay.
So it's a long process to understand all of the steps that they took, and who was who. But when you're looking about Zionism, it's not about the Jewish religion. It's about the scions, the sons of wealthy families who were placed, who bought their way into the Vatican, who became cardinals and bishops, and were running the countries. The kings and queens were only as a showpiece, and for somebody to point the finger at or to murder off, and then always keep, the real hand here hidden from the peoples because they didn't want to be exposed.
All right. So this letter to the Governor General, David Johnson, you wrote, pardon me, do you want to read that one, or which one are you thinking is more appropriate?
Well, yeah, I think the one to the Governor General kind of explains it all, because it's a treasonous act on all of their parts. And if you listen, last time I was on your show, we played the part where Justin Trudeau pledges allegiance to the Queen and swears to keep everything private.
Yes.
And this is what they all have to do. We're even talking about the lieutenant governors of the provinces and the premiers. So when you're looking at our governance, before we can even make a decision about our governance, we need to be able to know who the hell governs us and how do they do it. So what I did was, at first I started, I was really upset when I saw that AFN and Carolyn Bennett was, and if you'll notice, I never call these people honorable, because as far as I'm concerned, they were way below that. They have not earned that distinction, and until they do, they should not even be called that. But that's my thing. But if you're looking at Carolyn Bennett and what AFN signed in Niagara Falls, it makes everybody think in the world that now Canada has made new agreements with Carolyn Bennett and Justin Trudeau, and that AFN represents all of the nations across Canada, which is totally bogus. This guy was not even voted in by the people. It's only they're supposed to be only an advocacy group, and Bellegarde is not supposed to be representing himself as the decision maker for the nations across Canada.
Okay, so AFN is the Assembly of First Nations for those.
Yeah, which is totally bogus. It's like the FDA. Everybody thinks that the FDA is monitored by the U.S. government, and it's not. It's funded by the pharmaceuticals. So, we've got so much illusions, and this is purposefully set up. So what I did is I thought, okay, at first, because of proportional representation coming in, and I was glad that you mentioned Nathan Cullen, because what I did is I, made a claim on how the First Nations now, with all of these court decisions, the First Nations all have to be they have to ask consent. And in the court cases, the consent means everybody, who is 18 or over, they need to get consensus by a minimum of 51% of everybody in a nation.
Okay, now let's just stop there briefly. And when you say the First Nations would have to vote to ratify whatever gets decided or promoted by the AFN, yes?
Well, yeah.
Okay, so...
But AFN was never even chosen by the people to be the representative.
Gotcha, but if they are able to vote on what AFN suggests, then they could ratify if they choose. I guess what I'm driving at is that it's looking like First Nations will have a true direct democracy before the rest of us do.
Oh, absolutely. And they used to have it way before us.
Yes. Well, it's patterned on the, 7 tribes or something from the east, the Iroquois and a group of others. They had a system of
Six Nations.
Six Nations, direct democracy when they met. So, and that got put into the Constitution during Jefferson's time. That process.
Mind you, Jefferson, they made sure not to include direct democracy, even though they promised it. If you look at the United States history, they promised everybody direct democracy. When they drafted the Constitution, they said that everybody would have the benefit of signing that Constitution, but that never happened. Only the heads of the 13 states did.
All right, so let's go back to where we left off with AFN and this new thing with Bennett. So where does
that... So what I did is I put 3 court cases ranging from 1849, and these are precedents. And this would prove that any treaties, that Canada cannot enter into any international trade deals. Anything prior to all the way down to 1849.
Okay, what happened in 1849 to seal that door?
Well, the thing is that in 1849 there was a precedent set that the nations, that the treaties are supposed to be assessed in the manner that the nations understand them to be, and not the government to be.
Okay.
Okay? So whatever the nations think, perceive their treaty to be, that's what you're supposed to perceive it as.
All right.
Okay? So what they understand them to be is what's going to rule here.
So in
1849. So I might even have that date wrong there, but I've been looking at so many dates.
I hear you. And it's in the mid-1800s. Anyway, the kicker is, though, Nicole, is that this is a First Nations issue that can quash international so-called free trade agreements the federal government's trying to ram down our throats.
Absolutely, and this is what I'm trying to get out. And, I've noticed that a lot of our politicians don't even know their own history. So it's pretty sad.
Well, you don't have to be a politician to be ignorant of Canadian history, especially when you start to describe these facets of it that go back to 1400s and deal with the Vatican. Like, that's over the top. Nobody would have lifted that stone to look underneath it.
Exactly. So what I did is I addressed first the senators, then I sent the same letter that I sent to the senators, plus the one that I made in regards to Perry Bellegarde and what Justin Trudeau and Carolyn Bennett were doing, which is totally illegal. First of all, they signed this document. It doesn't even have a date on it.
I hear you.
Then they say it's not a binding agreement. Well, what the hell are they trying to promote here?
They want ultimate flexibility. How's that?
Yeah. So if we sue them for saying, hey, you signed this agreement, well, no, it's not dated.
Gotcha. Wow.
And it's not a binding agreement. But what is the illusion they're trying to portray? And this is what really pisses me off, is their, their double play on words, and the fact that they always put in that bait and switch tactic. And this, I've been calling Justin Trudeau, Justin Pinocchio Trudeau, bait and switch, because this is what he's doing, and that's their purpose. And so I figured, okay, I'm going to write to everybody in Parliament. I copied all of their email addresses. Thank goodness that Paul Chauvin helped me a little bit on that. And then we proceeded with everybody across Canada, even everybody in all of the assemblies at the federal levels as well. So this way, even Nathan Cullen cannot say that they do not know, or any MP, that they do not know what the hell I'm talking about.
Good.
Or about the actual history of our governance.
It's hugely timely right now. I thank you for doing that, Nicole.
Well, the thing is people have to wake up. You can't decide on proportional representation if you don't know your own history.
Yeah, that's what I've been saying.
And what they're doing.
It's window dressing.
Exactly. So what I did is I addressed this to Justin Trudeau, Elizabeth II, lieutenant governors, senators, and all federal and provincial parliamentarians, Attorney General, the Auditor General of Canada. I even sent it to the Auditor General of Ontario, the Ombudsman of Canada, AL. Okay, so I've been really busy.
So you crashed the email account.
Exactly. So I put down reopen letter and official notice to cease and desist all treasonous and deceitful acts being willfully committed against the citizens and Indigenous peoples of Canada.
Nice.
Please be advised that as a Canadian-born citizen, given our political history in Canada and the unjust level of neglect of fiduciary duty held to date by Elizabeth II, yourself, and to the 14 previous Governor Generals for Canada, all Prime Ministers, the Premiers of the provinces, Senators, all politicians, and by our entire judicial appointees, who should know the law regarding the specification, and implications of fiduciary duty, and our history in regards to the official decolonization of the colonies from Britain, of which was to officially take place as intended within the Statute of Westminster of 1931, but has been denied to all Canadians, and the hidden agenda to deny new treaty renegotiation rights to the Indigenous nations of Canada constitutes treason against us all. Furthermore, our history and reality indicates a serious breach of trust, and numerous countless deceitful crimes are continuously being committed to this very day, whether knowingly or unknowingly by all of you against we, the citizens of Canada, and the Indigenous nations within this country. This includes historical treasonous acts committed through the negotiation of international trade deals, while Indigenous treaties have not been fully renegotiated or even finalized. How can our government enter into international trade deals regarding our natural resources and other deals that affect all of our lives without having full lawful jurisdiction?
That's huge.
Yeah, that is huge. Would that also be criminal negligence, not only towards us, but to all other countries and investors involved with any dealings with Canada? What needs to be taken into consideration as treasonous acts by all of our governing bodies is that our history indicates that instead of our decolonization process being officially launched in 1931, as per the Statute of Westminster, that it has, without a shadow of a doubt, been purposefully subverted by all levels of Canadian governing bodies in not allowing the Canadian citizens and the Indigenous nations to become the true final decision makers regarding this country and our governance, and to further allow us to create a new constitution reflecting our final decision-making authority as the true stakeholders within our governance, as should have been done since 1931. The illusions of Canadians having a true democracy and the right to referendums is nothing more than a well-played-out illusion. The right to our proper decolonization process, governance, and referendums by we the people is still being held hostage by your office and those who are still helping our supposed officials who have put us under a de facto dictatorship regime since 1931. past premiers and prime ministers since 1931, including those within our Justice Departments, the Canadian Bar Association, and all lawyers, military, RCMP, and police systems, have all played a part in this dictatorship agenda by covering up and neglecting the truth. My question to all of you is, how can Canadians and Indigenous nations, given the truth of all that you have done since 1931, within such a deceitful manner, regain what you have stolen from all of us, when you hide behind unjust laws and a false democratic system of deceit created by your dictatorship, which does not allow us to be the ones to determine what is best for us all? Your blatant attempt at pretense of studying the possibility of allowing Canadians to have an electoral reform by instilling a proportional representation through dictatorship, bypassing all of our rights as an officially decolonized nation to choose our own system of governance, is proof positive of a Canadian nation held hostage by a true dictatorship regime. This makes me wonder how you can still sleep at night, or to look yourselves in the mirror, or for that matter, how our Supreme Court justices can make claims under God while maintaining their deceit. It is certainly obvious that our Creator itself would see all your actions as major sins being committed daily against its creation. The devastation and depletion of natural resources being done by your corporate cohorts, oppression and enslavement of human resources of the peoples of Canada, and especially what is continuously being done to further oppress and to control the Indigenous nations, and including what Canada is allowing our corporations to do to others and their natural resources in other countries, is certainly just as evil can be. As an important note, please keep in mind that when Canadians say they want their voices heard, it does not mean that we want hang on here.
That we want
it
to
does
only.
not mean, it does not mean that we want to only be allowed to choose who we want as our new political party representative, but to have the power of we the people and Indigenous nations being the ones to make all the decisions regarding our affairs, as being the official shareholders of our country and crown corporations, and deciding for ourselves which laws we will support or not, and which international trade deals we will decide to make with international corporations and countries, amongst many other things. Hang on there. I had to give it one more cough.
Yep, you're doing well.
Yeah, you should see, like, my pressure just goes up every time I read this.
Well, it's a really punchy letter. I really like it. Especially given.
Thank you.
You betcha. Especially given.
Okay, especially given that we are now, thanks to our political leaders' incompetence, the number one sued country in the world. How much more must we all suffer at the hands of tyranny? So please, explain to me and to all Canadians and the Indigenous nations how your position as the Commander-in-Chief of the Land and Naval Militia and of all naval and military forces of and in Canada, which should not be legally vested in the Queen, but rather lawfully placed into the hands of all the peoples of Canada since 1931. As your duty is to secure the help required for Canadians to instill a new constitution and a true, pure, direct democracy by the citizens of Canada and the Indigenous nations as being the official final decision makers for Canada and being the true sovereigns of this country, as well as doing all the wrongs perpetrated by those holding a false power as the Queen, Prime Minister, and Premiers, acting as though we have no rights to a formal decolonization rights process since 1931, by the opposing and willfully supporting a continual dictatorship from all levels of governance and of our continual suffering through an unlawful financial burden and lack of an honest judicial process since. I trust that this information will greatly clarify your official position and official position of Canadians and the Indigenous nations as being officially decolonized since 1931. And as to what you should be expecting to do as our Commander-in-Chief under our employ, and not as the Commander-in-Chief to a de facto Queen and government. Your duty belongs to us, the peoples of Canada, period. I hope that everyone will think long and hard upon their positions and to whom they owe their duty to, and to deeply reflect upon this open letter and official notice to cease and desist all treasonous and deceitful acts against the Canadian peoples and Indigenous nations, and to reconsider your lawful actions by reversing your military dictatorship de facto style of governance. Instill education regarding referendums in order to hand over the governance of the people, of the governance to the people of Canada as it should have been since 1931. Perhaps then, and only then, will your actions be considered as honorable. Anything less would not be honorable or acceptable under any circumstances. Without prejudice, and I trust that now that you have been made aware, that you will finally do the right and just move forward for all the peoples of Canada. And then please find attached a letter that was emailed to all of the federal and provincial parliament assemblies. If you wish more information on how we can assist you in fulfilling your duties to the people, please do not hesitate to contact me.
Nice. That's a great letter. So 1931, we were decolonized. So did that
1931.
So did that soften the suzerain's power or eliminate it?
Oh, no, it totally softened it. I mean, she's just here as a suzerain for military purposes. This is their de facto governance.
Right, but what we did as a nation in Libya, for example, and we're in Syria too, and we were in Iraq, but we destroyed the nation of Libya. We led the bombing of Libya. That wasn't something Canadians, I've not talked to any Canadians who supported that. That was the work of the suzerain, in my opinion. Again, she has the power outside the continent, outside the country, to do these things.
Well, she doesn't have the power. If you really read the documents, okay, she can only agree to whatever the Governor General says she can agree to.
Well, sure, but he's set up.
And then the Governor General can only agree to what our Prime Minister says.
And he gets his marching orders from the Queen's Privy Council, though, right?
Well,
we don't know. It's in secret. So, I mean, we got to leave that.
Exactly.
We have to leave that door open as a possibility that he's told through corporate people in the Queen's Privy Council, there's 300 or so members for life sworn to secrecy, and most of those corporations are controlled or at least have huge investments by the Queen of England. So the Prime Minister goes out and says to the Governor Generals, this is how we want things done, or to the Governors General. Right, he's the general of all the governors. All right, and then they march in step. Now,
well, as soon as they call them lieutenant or governor generals, that's military.
Yes, exactly. And it's always been a disturbing part for me to see that. All that should be eliminated. Now,
and this is why I mention that, because the job of the military in a country that needs to change governance. The military usually is instilled there, but the military is supposed to assist the people in restructuring their governance, not protecting the government from the people. And this is what we're seeing in Canada today.
What is the document or law that suggests the military should be for pro-people and not pro-government?
Well, they're there to protect the people. They're funded by the people.
Well, sort of the police, but we don't get that from them either. So
no, but that's it. And all of this has changed within the NATO definition, and who actually runs NATO now, and how come NATO is now ruling over our RCMP and police officers.
Exactly.
And this all comes boiling down to global governance, and who's in charge of global governance.
Okay, now we're coming down to the mess that this system leaves on the table for the world, not just for Canadians. Tell us about the World Trade Organization.
Well, the World Trade Organization, I know that you've played Bev Collins' video last week. Now, this woman did a really amazing job. However, anybody who's going to research, the past stuff from Canada, you will come across the World Trade Organization and the fact that Canada is the one that promoted its existence.
Wow, so we're being used by these corporate authorities and power.
Exactly. When we're talking about the New World Order and who's guilty, I wouldn't say that it's so much the Rothschilds. Canada is at the forefront of bringing in globalization. It always has since 1919.
Wow, and it was in Canada in 2010 that the austerity regime was launched, right? And this is
Right.
after stealing trillions from the public sector in the States, putting them into collateralized debt more obligations, insuring them by AIG in London, and then launching them out into the global market and trashing the global economy. After doing that, they put us on an austerity budget. Like they've robbed all the kitchen and the shelves of food, et cetera, and then they tighten the belt. Well, you know,
Exactly.
this is a genocidal kind of thinking that we're seeing here.
Well, it is, and this is why, like, I wrote that piece the other day on I Accuse, you know, and if you go under frauds, you'll be able to find it. And I ask everybody, you know, the thing is most people aren't realizing, but they're actually helping. Like, what part do we have? What are we doing? You know, the question that I ask is, are you being manipulated into the United Nations corporate global governance agenda?
Yes.
And the thing is when you look, everything's compartmentalized. And a lot of NGOs and everything, everybody is helping to bring in global governance, and they have no clue. COP21, Agenda 21, these are pure examples. COP21 is to bring in international law above us, which will circumvent all of our constitutions.
Right.
Since when? It's like now they're going to be using drones on those poor people fighting the pipelines.
Right, exactly.
Drones were not allowed. The reason why what the United States did, they made sure that because the military people, you know, when they're going in other countries and they're fighting, they get very aggressive. So they want to make sure, so they came out with a law making sure that the military cannot be used inside of our own countries. Because, you know, they'll just shoot to kill. And so in order to create a more softer approach, they created the National Guard in the United States. So now you've got the National Guard that are the only ones that are supposed to be able to do anything in the United States, but then that's no longer true because now they'll bring in the military to protect corporations against the people.
So,
we saw that in Canada.
Yes, we did. Okay.
In New Brunswick. So when they're bringing in private military or the military itself, that goes against all of our constitutions. It doesn't matter which country you're in.
Okay, so it's crossing the Cannonball River in North Dakota is like crossing the Rubicon in Caesar's time.
Yeah.
Wow, it's amazing.
So now they're bringing in drones. The National Guard isn't even supposed to be using things like drones. It doesn't matter whether they're not dangerous. Dangerous to who? They still are dangerous against the protesters.
Okay, so these are the consequences of not having control of your governance system. Now,
Exactly, and everything that they're doing. If you look at Canada,
yes,
okay, and the power that the Indigenous nations and Canadians would have if they understood their authority in Canada, and never mind political party elections, and to stand up and demand their rights as far as, you know, being the true shareholders of these countries, they wouldn't even think about political parties.
yes.
And it's up to us to make the decisions. Even though if we only start small by saying, having the right final say if we're going to war, we never were questioned about, do we want a World Trade Organization? And this was done in 1995. I don't remember, you know, as a Canadian citizen being asked that question.
So you want a referenda system?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything should be coming through referendums, not plebiscites, but referendum. What they've given us were never real referendums. They were plebiscites.
What's that last word?
Plebiscites.
What's
or
that?
Plebiscites.
Oh, plebiscites. Gotcha.
Plebiscites.
No worries.
Yes.
Good one. Okay.
That's my French, right?
I hear you.
So,
it's good. I like it. It's good. So I'm thinking, because we're creeping down to the end of the hour, and we're going to have you back here if you want. I want you to come back, maybe as soon as next week, because we're not getting to the point that's the juicy part of all this. We're talking history and damage that's come out from this. What we really want to focus on is how to change this. So can we kind of switch tracks a wee bit, give the audience a taster about what your group says we can do to get back to like a liquid direct democracy, and then either next week or the week after, we'll give the whole hour to that process and what we can do about that. How do you say about that?
Yeah, that'd be great. And one of the things that I wrote on my last writings that you read the other day is the fact that we need to stop focusing on what they're telling us and what they're writing, because that's all illusion. That is the bait and switch tactics that they are using. And when they're using that tactic, that's when we get confused. So if you look at actions, okay, the actual actions that they have undertaken, that tells the truth. So we need to try and train everybody into looking at actions and to block their ears and to not read what they're saying. Just look at their actions.
Right.
Because I'll tell you, this is when I've had a lot of WTF moments.
Gotcha.
And it's, okay, then you see the bait and switch. So when things are offered to the Canadian citizens and to the First Nations, and you'd think that the nations would have learned this by now, right? Being that they've been at the forefront of all of this oppression and all of the lies and manipulation. And now we're just starting to wake up to the fact that we've been lied to since 1931 and even before that. These are all things that we need to focus on, and focus on the fact that we should be the final decision makers. We need to get back to that. A politician will not give us that.
Exactly. They're a corporation. They represent their party, their corporate party. So
yes, and these are paper entities. So right now, the only thing we can do, we need to do, and we need to do this worldwide, but Canada would, because Canada is the forefront of bringing in the global governance agenda, New World Order, which a lot of people would not believe, but if you look at the government documentation, it proves it. It proves Canada was always the first one to bring in those laws.
Well, you look at the Trilateral Commission and some of these international groups, Maurice Strong, whole pile. We had a Canadian, Mitchell Sharp was the right-hand man for all of North America, for right-hand man for Rockefeller when they broke up the economy of the world into Asia, the Americas, and Europe. Mitchell Sharp, Liberal member. So we've been betrayed up the yin-yang in this country. And so now we're coming into a time where we can actually talk about a completely different type of governance coming in through a different type of political structure.
Yeah, and we don't need to get rid of our politicians, okay? All we need to remove, the one thing that's going to make us safe is to remove their final decision-making authority and having to force them to come to Canadians for the decision-making.
Gotcha.
That's all we really need to start the ball rolling.
So that would happen
quite quickly. And then we can all be educated.
Gotcha. And it would be an incremental process is what you're saying. We'd feel our way through it.
Exactly. We don't need to take huge steps. We just need to take baby steps. But the most important part is to officially remove their final decision-making authority above the people.
So we don't even, at that point, have to have them swear allegiance to the Constitution. Really.
No.
We just say, you just change the way you do your business with us.
Exactly.
Okay. So
but then they'd have to pledge allegiance to the Canadian citizens. I mean,
I hear you.
But that's if we want them to make a pledge, which we should, and then bring in recall. We'd be allowed to bring in recalls and whatnot. But they would never be able to make a decision without our explicit consent.
This would be a lot like Switzerland in that regard.
Well, Switzerland, that's a fake democracy as well. It's like allowing the prisoners to run themselves.
I see.
Okay, let them run themselves, and we'll give them a little bit of authority here. They'll think they're free, and they'll be able to make decisions at their local levels. But when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, the government can veto their powers.
You know, it sounds a lot
That is not democracy.
It isn't, and it sounds a lot like the attitude of a suzerainty, actually. That when
it is.
Yeah.
It is.
It's a pattern of thinking.
It's just that it gives people, it's like, you take an elephant and you put a rope around it and you tie it up. And after that, you can you can untie the rope and it'll never move.
Gotcha. I see.
We're going under the same mental strategic tactics. And then what they've done, adding insult to injury. Now we've got people in Canada in organizations who are using something like the Delphi technique and saying, I did a survey from leadnow.ca. Not once did they give the people an option to add another type of democracy to be added to the survey.
Not once.
So that is misleading.
Yes, it is. It's not our decision then, is it?
No, it's not. They only LEAD now added proportional representation, on top of what we already have now. But not once did they implicate that. They never asked or even mentioned direct democracy. Why is that?
Okay.
I had to ask myself, okay, are these people either ignorant to these facts, or are they used as a coup to push proportional representation when that is the wrong thing to do, because it's, again, a false sense of democracy?
All right. So we're pretty well at the end, maybe a minute or two, and I'm wondering if you want to give people a heads up as to how you'll describe what you'll be saying on the next interview about what your group I Accuse offer as an alternative to proportional rep or whatever we've got. Let's go get
Yeah, well, what we'll do is we'll do a step-by-step because first of all, we need to determine that we want to officially decolonize by ourselves without the government's involvement. We don't need it. We can be legally signing this agreement, but we need 70% of the communities to do it. So we're going to be explaining the step-by-step on first we do this, and then we can look at installing constituency parliaments and education. And once we have final decision-making authority, that means we can revert everything that we want to, like the Bank of Canada, into our possession and to our discretion.
Gotcha. Excellent. I like that.
As to, our own, the printing of our own money.
Yes, exactly. So will you come on next week and we'll go into that part of it in detail?
I'd love to, and I thank you for inviting me on.
It's a great pleasure speaking with you. You've got so many good ideas, and you've done so much hard work. All of you there at I Accuse, I thank you all for the work you do on behalf of us. The rest of us, all of us kind of dumbed down so much on this. It's hugely important, and the time is now, without a doubt. I thank you again, Nicole Lebrasseur of iaccuse.com.
Thank you very much.
See you next week. You're very welcome. Bye-bye.
Will do. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Wow, that's awesome to get that kind of detailed information with dates and documents is invaluable, especially at this time. It's like serendipitous. You know what that means? Serendipitous? Fortuitous happenstance. So you go to their website, i-accuse.com, and get caught up on what they're up to. And then next week, we'll go into the nitty-gritty of how we get this process off the ground and make it one of the options in the discussion of a new electoral system, a new governance process that we all need here. I'm going to have to set up the commercial material for the top of the hour, and I'm going to give you some a tune here in the meantime. It's called Promises. That'll work. It's called Promises. It's from the group The Fundamentals. This CD is called Get All Right. And once this tune is through, I may come back and say a few things. I'm not sure I'll have time for that. I will say now then, remember, resistance is creativity, and creativity is resistance. So don't give up, and just keep your eyes and ears open. And I'll talk to you next week.
Every breath, the staircase in the closet used to lead us to the roof. Now we're stuck in bedrooms, getting closer to the truth. There's alcohol and longing on our lips and in our guts.